Namaskar. We have a very... Namaskar, Ramesh Bjonnes. He's our my Zoom partner from the United States in Asheville, North Carolina, where he's the director and manager of our Prama Wellness Center there, which is one of the many in our network of yoga, wellness, naturopathy centers around the world. And I'm thrilled to be talking with you all today about what could be argued the most important aspect of naturopathy, yogic naturopathy. We'll be talking with you about the meaning of alkaline, alkalinity, alkalinizing, alkaline food especially. And because there's a lot of misunderstanding on this, and it's a very simple thing to understand. And when you do understand this, and when you start to implement it, step by step, you're going to see such an enormous change taking place in your life that gradually you won't recognize who you used to be. You'll become a much more subtle person on the physical level, and that will enable you to do so on the psychic level. So much will change. Whatever heaviness is in your body, whatever slowness, whatever is there, lack of energy, whatever sickness is there, whatever disease is there, it all becomes affected by switching into the direction, into the alkaline direction. So to explain, to highlight something of the misunderstanding of this topic, and we will be giving you a very simple system to follow how you can gradually implement it. Ramesh, I think you have some story to tell us.
Yeah, thank you, Dada, for that wonderful introduction. So I will share a story about Peter, a person I worked with a couple of years ago. He was having a very heavy diet and a lot of protein, fish, sometimes 3 times a day. And he would wake up every morning pretty much with a very heavy stomach and feeling nauseous. And he was diagnosed with IBS and Crohn's disease. And so he came to our center, and I simply told him, we need to change your diet. We need to make it more alkaline. And within about 7 days, he had no pain, no nausea, and he was feeling fantastic. And he implemented this system into his life at home, and I visited him some 6 months later. And then I discovered that he had alkaline water system in his house. However, that alkaline water had not helped. In other words, we need to understand what this system is all about. What is alkaline food? Why is it that alkaline water didn't help him, but the alkaline food did? So this is what we're going to talk about. We're also going to teach you and show you and explain why lemon water, which is considered acidic, is actually having an alkaline effect. It's alkalinizing, as Dada was saying. Same thing with pineapple. So these are some of the secrets we're going to teach you in this video today.
Right. So here we need to understand that the blood in our bodies, it's maintaining a certain pH that is an alkaline acid balance no matter what you do. But the thing is that when you eat food which is, and here's the key, which is difficult to digest, then it creates much more burden on the digestive organs of the body, on the stomach, on the intestines, on the pancreas, on the liver, and the gallbladder. So many organs, they become affected by the work of digestion. And when they have to work harder in order to what? Maintain the pH balance in the blood, because so much acidity, so much toxins are coming from the difficult to digest food, then those organs become tired. And as a result, it becomes more and more difficult for the body to maintain its pH balance, which it's going to do invariably. So the more difficult to digest the food is, the harder your organs have to work. And therefore, if you're taking food which makes it easy for your body to maintain the alkaline condition. So we call that food alkalinizing food. Or we call the food which is very difficult to digest acid-forming food, because the difficult to digest food, it requires a lot more acid in your stomach and in other parts of the digestive system in order to process it. So the body will create more acid from the acid forming, means difficult to digest foods, and then the body has to struggle to bring itself to the proper balance. So what foods are alkalinizing and what foods are acid forming? Not alkaline and acid, but alkalinizing and acid forming. So that's why lemon water, it requires not only no effort to digest, but rather it is helping to digest other things, as long as you don't have an ulcer or as long as you don't have hyperacidity. The lemon water is very, very good for essentially everybody. And pineapple, that's a little bit, some people do react to that, but most people don't, and it's very easy to digest. It is also helpful. These are just examples of misunderstandings about this. Can you give some other misunderstandings about this, Ramesh?
Some other misunderstandings is that actually coffee and tea, black tea, because of the caffeine, are also acid forming, and also different chemicals in the environment, different pharmaceutical medications and so on. Sugar, because as Dada was explaining, they are taking energy and taxing the digestive system, and therefore those foods, or in other words, those non-foods, are also problematic for this.
Because they have, in the coffee and tea, there is caffeine. And the caffeine is a poison to the body. So the body has to work to stick it out. For every cup of coffee we drink, we need to drink 2 cups of water just to clean it out. It's giving a lot of work to the body, so it is acid forming, even though there's no special acid necessarily in that coffee or that tea. And it is even more the case with Western pharmaceutical medicines. They're difficult for the body to process. Now, what are the most alkalinizing foods? And when we get into detoxing, which is what our webinar will be about and our coaching program will be about, then this initial list is also good for detoxing. So the easiest to digest food, which is the most alkalinizing, well, of course, lemon water is there. But when you get into foods, you'll first find herbal tea, apple cider vinegar. These are very easy to digest, but they're not automatically digested. Just a little bit of effort is required, almost nothing. And the same thing goes for coconut water, and then you get water with a little bit of honey. So you're slowly making these are very alkalinizing, but they're just getting slightly more challenging to process. And then you'll get your fruit juices. Then you'll get vegetable juices. And then and after the fruit juices are more challenging to process than herbal tea, for example, of course. Then you get vegetable juices. Very nutritious, very wonderful foods, fantastic foods, and at the same time, very alkalinizing food. And then just a little bit more challenging than that, but still excellent, is your fruits themselves. Fruits means the juicy type fruits, the papaya, the grapes, the kiwis, the melons, and then you get a little bit harder fruits, guavas, some apples are there, and then you'll get into, and then you see this very, very ripe banana is there, not the ordinary banana, but the banana which is almost rotten but still beautiful and sweet, and maybe the skin is spotted. This is a very alkaline food, not quite as alkaline as those other fruits are, and then we get the vegetables. And the vegetables, when you look at the more starchy vegetables, they come lower down in the list. This is easy to understand. What is difficult, what is easy to digest, the most easy to digest is the most alkaline. And then at that point, we're switching from raw foods to cooked foods, or we're simply including cooked foods, but here it's not cooked with oil. But you can include extra virgin oil, not to cook it with, but just to add at the end, and it is not so difficult to digest. Rather, it is providing some very important fats for the body. And at the same time, if you will include some spices in it, no problem, as long as the spices are not burning to your digestive system. And finally, we can get the baby sweet corn, the baby green peas, and there you've got the most alkalinizing foods that exist, which are also good for graduated fasting that we'll talk about in the webinar. Ramesh?
And the amazing thing about this food list is that in this food list, we also have the most highly antioxidant foods in the fruits and the berries and so on, which are highly alkalinizing. And then in the green leafy vegetables, sprouts and so on, we have the most nutrient-dense foods. In other words, the foods that have the highest micronutrition. And so, in other words, nature has provided these foods to us that are natural for us to digest, that are both highly antioxidant, gives the immune system support, and then we get maximum micronutrients from all of the greens, the vegetables, the cabbage, the kale, and so on and so forth, the broccoli. So those are the foods that should be the basis of our diet, the fundamental. If we think of a pyramid, that should be the first and the second rung on that food pyramid. So that's the food we should focus on.
It's amazing. This is the food which is most cleansing and at the same time the most nutritious. How God arranged it is like that. Anyway, from that now we get down into just slightly more difficult to digest, and we'll call this food semi-alkalinizing, which is good for people who are healthy. And I'm eating them, mostly these foods, I eat them every day, unless I become sick, which, it doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I will feel challenged, and then I will leave these foods out of my diet for a short time. So we start there with the nut milks, with the legume milks, with the grain milks, with rice milk, oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, as long as it doesn't create gas in your system. And then a little bit more challenging than that is yogurt itself. This is irrespective of whether you're a vegan or just a vegetarian. And then we get blackstrap molasses, which doesn't have the white sugar is not in that one. And then you get the vegetables that I didn't talk about before, I didn't include before. Those are your starchy vegetables, especially potatoes, cassava, and the normal banana, which is not super ripe. It has to go there. If you take it even really with a little part of the skin green, it's actually constipating and really challenging to digest. And then we get tofu, fresh tofu, and nuts, and then we get that's the semi-alkalizing foods. And then we'll come into another category, which is the semi-acid forming food, which is still good for healthy people, but a lot of people take these in too big a quantity. So you have to see what your body can easily process. It's different from person to person. And in this list, at the top of this list, comes buckwheat. Buckwheat is an extremely alkaline. It's so alkaline that it's in between being a grain and an herb. And then you get those grains which are most easy to digest, which is like millet and quinoa, and a little bit more challenging than that, a little bit more acid forming than that, is going to be your other whole grains like your whole wheat, brown rice, and whole grain noodles, corn, oats, barley, and finally in this semi-acid forming group we get the legumes themselves, the mung beans, the soybeans, the black beans, the kidney beans, and all the other, those kind of beans.
And now we're coming to the acid-forming food. So some of this food is okay once in a while, but we want to limit these kinds of foods in our diet. So for example, we talked about the greens, the vegetables, and so on that are alkaline. But then if we saute those vegetables in oil, they become acid forming because of the heating of the oil. Same thing with sugar, raw sugar, refined sugar, white sugar, and so on is also highly acid forming. The different refined grains, such as white bread, white rice, white noodles, and so on, they are also acid forming because they turn into sugar. They're highly refined and quickly raise the blood sugar and so on. And then vegetarian meat or the veggie meats. Why? Because they're highly refined. Some of these veggie meats, some of these, tofu dogs and so on, they have like 40, 50 ingredients. So they're highly refined and difficult for the body to digest because of all the ingredients. Tea, coffee, we already mentioned, is also very acid forming. And vegetarian junk food, as I mentioned, with these tofu dogs and so on. So there are many people that are vegetarians and even vegans, but they're not healthy because they're eating vegetarian and vegan junk food. And then the final category is the extremely acid-forming food. And I think by now you probably have guessed what that food is, which is, for example, if you're a vegetarian deep-fried food, your pakoras, you go to an Indian restaurant, it fry it in oil for a very, very long time, and it becomes very difficult to digest. Fish, and if you fry the fish, it becomes even more difficult to digest. Chicken, poultry, meat, and eggs. And actually eggs is somewhat even more acidic than probably fish if you cook the fish, because it has a lot of cholesterol and is very difficult to digest. So these are the very acid-forming foods that we should eliminate from our diet, or minimize, eat very, very rarely. And then dairy products is also acid-forming, but it depends on the digestion. It depends on your ethnicity, because if you're Norwegian like me, you might digest it better than a Filipino who is not used to it in their genetic history. So finally, I just want to mention that our digestive system, I wondered about this for so many years. Why is it that humans should be vegetarians? Because, people from the Stone Age, they lived in these cold climates and they ate meat and so on. But then when I studied the long history of humanity, which goes back millions of years, we will find that humanity developed in very warm climates. And so these kinds of foods were plentiful, and that's how we developed the digestive system that is very different from a wolf or a carnivore. And that is why these are the kinds of foods that we should eat and digest.
The meat-eating mammals, the bears, the dogs, the cats, the tigers, the lions, they're all having, their anatomy is very different. They have teeth, big teeth to catch their prey. They have a very short intestine so that they can digest their food very quickly. Their skin, it doesn't sweat. All the perspiration is coming through their tongue. They have a very strong stomach acid, 20 times that of the vegetarian mammals. Vegetarian mammals means like cows and goats and rabbits and buffalo and all those. And human beings are 100% on the vegetarian mammal from the standpoint of anatomy, but 0% from the standpoint of anatomy with the carnivores. Nevertheless, you are going to implement these things in your own way, according to your own disposition, your own way of seeing and thinking and feeling. There's going to be a difference in the diet of those who are very healthy and those who are very sick. The people who are more sick, they're going to be more motivated to change, and their life may depend on changing. There's going to be a difference from young to old. But the older people, even if they're following very alkaline diet, they may want to take much less grains, much less legumes, even on the good diet. So differences come. And that's why it's very important that you don't feel a pressure from anything that we are saying or teaching. You do the things in your own speed. You have to see, if you're emphasizing raw food, which for most people is excellent, but what if it produces gas in you? Then you can't take so much raw food for the time being until your body is able to adjust more. Cold climates, hot climates, these things make a difference. But for everybody, the most acid forming food, extremely acid forming, the meat, fish, eggs, these deep fried foods, you really want to minimize them. But don't knock yourself on the head trying to stop them. If you feel difficulty, let it happen in its own speed. You just think, I'm going to take the maximum I can of good and healthy foods, and whatever little space is left in my stomach, I'll consider whether I'll put garbage in it. You can know, at least you should know, that when you're taking something which is harmful to your body, you should know, you shouldn't think, oh, this is very harmful. You should think, I'm just taking this for entertainment. It's not going to help me in any way. Be honest with yourself, and that it will enable you to change. Entertainment is fine. I also take some ice cream sometimes, even though I know it's not going to help me in any way. But it doesn't hurt me much. A little bit. But it's fun. It's tremendously fun. So these are the ideas of system. So gradually wins the way. Thank you so very much. Write your questions, write your comments. We will try our best to respond to them. Thank you and namaskar.